So hi guys, Reverend Moses here. I want to apologize. This week didn't come together. We couldn't have confirmation class. Really sorry about that. I did send something to your folks, or if I haven't already, I will. And when they get it, they're going to have to, well, they'll give it to you and let you work on it. But it's a little work we're going to do in between, and has everything to do with Halloween, what we're talking about this week, because I want to talk to you guys a little bit about where it comes from, what it has to do with church, and what you guys are going to have to do with your work. I'm also sharing this on our Facebook page for anybody else who might be interested. So anyway, how is Halloween associated to the church? Simply put, it kind of is, it kind of isn't. We kind of took it over, we kind of didn't. But anyway, where it comes from is that it's an old Celtic tradition. Celtic, now you should all know what that means for Newfoundlanders. Celtic is Irish. It's kind of that sort of thing from that part of the world. I could get into it bigger than that, but that's the simplest one, because everything I say right now is going to keep it simple. But the Celtic tradition was that at this time of year, it was the tradition and the celebration by those people that they would go into and celebrate the harvest. They would be, taking all their crops from the fields and everything else. And that could be potatoes, that could be pumpkins, that could be gourds, that could be all the wonderful, delicious turnips, all that good stuff. Good Irish vegetables like carrots and all that stuff. And they would pick that up in preparation for the long, cold winter ahead. Because you guys know the nights are getting shorter now, or longer now, and days are getting shorter. And they noticed too. They noticed so much that the Celtic tradition was that during this time of year, they'd recognize that life was giving way to abundance, the harvest, but it was also about to die. And I mean that sincerely, because if you think about it, fall, all the leaves falling off the trees going, stark naked then for the rest of the winter and nothing really growing, they kind of looked at it as this was a time where the season of death, for lack of a better word, was coming upon them. And then spring would be new life. But when that time of year came, with the harvest over here, the abundance of things, and then the time where nothing grew, it kind of came together, right around the end of October, beginning of November, it kind of brushed up against each other, and they had a belief, which was that was also the time of the year where the dead needed to be celebrated and remembered and given, paid homage, for lack of a better word, because they might be wandering. They might be confused at this time of year because the land of the dead and the land of the living were rubbing up against each other. It's kind of that. And that's an interesting tradition, but it's the idea that not to be spooky about it. It's not like a bunch of zombies or ghosts or something are wandering the streets or anything this time of year, much as nowadays it kind of is interpreted that way. But what happened is that at around the same time, later, of course, because Celtic traditions came long before the church came over to Ireland, even though the Christian beliefs came before them, to a point. When the Christian faith came to Ireland and all the rest of it, they kind of had an understanding of what it meant to celebrate the dead, because they had an understanding that to remember those we have lost, whether it be because those we loved and who have died, or whether it was to pray for the saints gone ahead of us, that was part of who we were. So they kind of made a day on November the 1st called All Saints Day, and on November the 2nd called All Souls Day. And both of those days were right next to the Celtic holiday, or tradition, which is called Samhain. Well, it's spelt like Samhain. It's spelt really differently, but it's pronounced Samhain. And that Celtic tradition and these Christian traditions kind of bumped together, kind of like a lot of the things we do in Christmas. Like a lot of the things we do at Christmas have weird relationships to older traditions as well. Like saying the word Yule log, or having mistletoe or green stuff all over your house, even the Christmas tree to a point, all comes from kind of a mishmash of traditions that came from all over the world that kind of found its roots or found a place in the Christian way that we celebrate Christmas nowadays. And in a similar way, when Halloween came, when we celebrated that as part of the church, to remember and commemorate those who had gone ahead of us, that's kind of what it became. But some of the things that they do in the old Celtic ways was they would have bonfires to light the darkness that was about to come, the long nights that were about to come, and they'd have this bonfire on that night to basically not only to light and be a light in the presence of this darkness that was coming, but it was also and to give comfort and strength to those who were about to face down the winter. It was also the idea that they were going to, it was an opportunity to be that light to ward off any evils or darkness that might be around. Not necessarily oogie boogies or spooks, but just the idea of being a light in the darkness. And sometimes they would make lanterns, jack-o'-lanterns if you want to call them that. They could have been pumpkins, they could have been potatoes, they could have been turnips, it could have been anything. but they make these gourd lanterns and they carry them around. And in some of the traditions as well, and I always kind of get this part mixed up if it was Christians or Celtics or both that kind of made this happen, but to go around and check in on those who are less fortunate, like maybe the harvest wasn't as good for you, so you go in and check on them and you'd share you'd make a collection, like instead of almost reverse trick-or-treating. Instead of going door to door asking for treats, you'd bring it to them. And it also became another thing, and I think this was kind of Christian and Celtic in its origins, which was that sometimes some of the young people of the community, the kids, would dress up almost like mummers, so that they look like they'd have like bags over their heads or something to hide who they were, but they'd look more like ghosts or spirits, and they'd go door to door singing to collect food for the less fortunate and the poor. And they would sing or they'd recite poetry or something, but they'd have to do something, trick, to receive something, treat. You know, that's where it kind of comes from. And it kind of turned into that. Because what happened now is that modern Halloween is kind of take all that, but kind of make it more partying. And that's fine. I mean, to celebrate with your neighbors and to bring that light and that presence of good feeling and cheer when you're facing down the dark that is winter, or when you're facing down the loss of a loved one, or when you want to celebrate the lives of those you love but see no longer. That kind of all goes with church, that kind of all goes with Christianity, and that's kind of what it developed into when the people from the Celtic tradition moved from Ireland ages ago over to the North America, like Canada and the States. And when that all happened, those traditions kind of bubbled up with the church, and it all turned into what it is now. Now, nowadays, Halloween is very commercial. I mean, you buy a costume and you dress up as just about anything, from a cartoon show to a horror movie icon to, I don't know, a crayon set or something with your friends or something weird. And that's fine. And having the decorations the way they are, it's fine. And have that spooky understanding of it is fine. But it has turned into more of a horror show than it has really a celebration of the loved ones we don't see anymore. We focus more on death in the sense of what the word is macabre, meaning like the gruesomeness and the creepiness that comes with death, as opposed to celebrating the life that once was. Anyway, so my point is that there are Christian roots and there are Christian symbols that are all a part of what it is to celebrate Halloween too. Especially right down to the fact that Halloween itself is All Hallows Eve, the day before All Hallows or All Saints Day and All Souls Day. It's basically where the word comes from that we use today. Just like when you say Christmas, well, it's Christ right in it, and Mass, and it's supposed to be the remembrance of Christ's birthday kind of a thing. Anyway, no matter what you do with this season, this holiday, what I'd like you to do is the work that I give to your folks by email, is to consider what symbols do we have now that kind of carry over. Even in the midst of the spookiness and the creepiness of what we know as Halloween is today, what are some things that you would recognize as kind of a Christian thing, a churchy thing, that still associates itself to Halloween? I've named a few now. If you can think of some more, that's fine too. I'm going to leave a few examples on the page that we send you. Anyway, guys, I'm sorry we couldn't meet this week. My fault entirely. But next week, we're going to try and do our best to meet as we usually do. Wednesday, 7 o'clock. And if you have any reason you can't make it, please let me know. Stay safe and pray safe, guys. And happy Halloween. I was going to wear a mask. I didn't, but there you go.